Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of our Islam Study Circle. Uh, we will study some parts of the Quran, Hadith, and of course the Bible before we go on to our next segment in which we discuss a common misconception regarding Islam. So, without further ado, let's start off with studying the text of the Quran. You would be seeing the text being displayed right before you. It's verse 256 of Surah Baqarah, and it says, La ikraha fid deen, قد تبين الرشد من الغي فمن يكفر بالطاغوت ويؤمن بالله فقد استمسك بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله سميع عليم. A simple translation of this verse would be, there is no compulsion from God in religion. The fact is that after this Quran, guidance is now totally distinct from error. So he who renounces Satan and believes in God, it is as if he has grasped a strong rope that can never break. And God hears all and knows all. So, dear participants, you can see that these are one of the, I would in fact say this is one of the most moving passages of the Quran vis-a-vis the humanitarian message it carries and vis-a-vis the freedom of choice it gives all of us in accepting the truths that we come across. So the first thing which is this verse actually says is that there is no compulsion in religion. This is something that you can see and find in at other places of the Quran as well. For example, there is a verse which says, "Man sha'a fal yu'min wa man sha'a fal yakfur," which means that any person who would like to adopt the way of gratitude or for of guidance, he can do so, and the person who adopts the way of disbelief, it's up to him. So the bottom line here is that the Almighty does not want to force His view upon people. This verse is very, very vehemently underlying and underscoring this, that as far as acceptance of a particular point of view is concerned, there is absolutely no compulsion. It is not that God is forcing you to accept something which you perhaps might not be convinced of. Of course, there are consequences of denial, but they are that's another entirely different story. But as far as the fact is concerned, that is it that guidance or a viewpoint is being forced upon someone? This is not the case, and I think this is one of the most beautiful aspects of our religion, in which guidance is not forced upon us, or guidance the way God would like us to be guided is not forced down our throats. In fact, the thing what the Quran says is that righteousness and falsehood have been made distinct through this Quran. If there was any doubt, if there was any confusion, the Quran has removed it. Guidance has now become absolutely distinct from what falsehood was. So now it's entirely up to people if they would like to accept something, and entirely up to them if they would like to reject them. And then you see the verse goes on and continues and says, فَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالطَّاغُوتِ وَيُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ اسْتَمْسَكَ بِالْعُرْوَةِ الْوُثْقَى. That so he who renounces Satan and believes in God, it is as if he has grasped a strong rope that can never break. So Al-Urwatul Wusqa is a very strong expression of the Almighty regarding the Quran. It says that the Quran is like a strong rope, which if you cling on to this rope, it'll it'll make you get in touch with the Almighty. It is something in which you will find yourself being attached to the Almighty God Himself. So this thing, what this verse actually tells us is that as far as the study of the Quran is concerned, as far as believing the Almighty is concerned, he should understand that that belief is something which is so strong that if a person grasps it, he is fully conversant with what the Almighty wants him. So, in other words, renouncing Satan and believing in God is what is required. And renouncing Satan, of course, means that everything which comes in the way of righteousness, everything which comes in the way of our conscience should be renounced. So, as the verse goes on, it says that that this belief in God is so strong that it's like a rope which can never break. It's such a strong rope that it attaches you to the Almighty in such a strong way that a believer can rest assured that this connection is not going to break. And then it says, Wallahu Samiun Alim, and God hears and knows all. So therefore, we should understand and we should fully contemplate that whatever we are doing here is in His knowledge. He is fully aware of what we are doing here. He sees and He hears. And when He sees and He hears, then this, of course, means that whatever is in the hearts of people, whatever they even whisper to each other, is in His knowledge. So, all in all, you can clearly see that this verse, like Rafid Deen, rushdu min al is a very strong message which the Quran intends to give to its addressees. It wants to tell them that you are not going to be forced to accept a point of view. You have to adopt something out of your own choice. It's entirely up to you to adopt a certain thing and entirely up to you to forsake something. However, if you forsake Satan and believe in God, then you should know that you have actually clung to a very strong rope which can never break. Which, in other words, means that if you adopt this guidance which is being presented to you in the form of the Quran, then you have to be very, very clear and content with the fact that this is a strong attachment that you are witnessing. You are not going to break aloof from this, and God is going to hold you and help you in your journey. So, as far as this verse is concerned, of course, the question that immediately comes to mind is the perhaps the punishment of apostasy, which of course is stipulated. You can see in some of our fiqh books, which say, almost all of them, in fact, say that a person who accepts faith and then renounces it, he should be put to death. And therefore, people do think that if this is the case, then how can this verse be correct? So this is precisely what, inshallah, I'm going to discuss as a misconception in the next section of this Quran study circle. You can please just hold on to this thought if it has come to you, that how come there is no compulsion in religion on the one hand, and on the other hand, we find the hadith of the Prophet saying, "Man baddala dinahu faqtuluhu," which means that if a person changes his faith or if a person renounces Islam, then he has to be put to death. So how are these two compatible? How can we reconcile these two things? So, as I said, inshallah, we will discuss this in the later segment. But as far as this segment is concerned, I think this is a message that we can proudly present to humanity. And that is why this is something which relates to humankind. When the Almighty is telling us something, we can even see how tolerant is the Almighty. He could have forced himself on all of us. He could have forced his guidance on all of us, but he did not choose to do so. What he chose to do so was to present it before people and let them make this choice for themselves. So I think this is something which the Almighty wants to teach us as well. When He has not forced us on a particular viewpoint, we ourselves also should adopt the same attitude. We should not force our view on others. All we should do is present the matter as clearly as we can, argue the matter as clearly and as logically as we can. But other than that, it is up to the people to accept or to reject it. So I think this is a huge message. It's a very potent and a very powerful message which the verse conveys, that when the Almighty is tolerant upon all of us, He does not force His opinion. All He does is He makes guidance and error or misguidance distinct from one another so that we are able to grasp what guidance is. So when He is so tolerant, we earthlings should behave no differently. We should also not impose ourselves. We should also not play the role of a person who thinks that he or she has to force other people to accept their point of view. And in fact, if we do so, we actually lose out on the message itself. Because if the message itself is logical, if it is powerful, let the argument of the message be presented in a way that people accept it, in a way that people use their intellect, in a way that people think about it, in a way that people are able to not only digest it, but they are so moved with the message that they become proponents of the message, that they in fact start preaching the message. They become advocates of that message. So, what big achievement, of course, we can have as a result of this attitude. So, I think this is it's a big message that the Quran has given us, that the Almighty has given us, that we must not impose ourselves on other people. All that we should do is we should clearly argue something, and of course, that too at opportune times. It's not always that we should pick up something and start ranting about it, because there are times that people are busy, people are in their own routine. So we have to pick and choose the time. But when the time is ripe, the best way is to humbly present what you have in mind, argue it well, reason it out well, and that's it. And as the Almighty Himself has said, that if guidance and falsehood have been made distinct, and there is no compulsion from Him on us, then who are we to compose ourselves on others? So now let's move on to the next part of our first segment, and this is actually the hadith of the day that we're going to discuss. And this hadith is taken from the Jami al-Sahih of Imam Muslim. So the words are, أن عائشة قالت سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول ما من شيء يصيب المؤمن حتى الشوكة تصيبه إلا كتب الله له بها حسنة أو حطت عنه بها خطيئة, which says, which means Aisha said, I heard God's messenger as saying, for every calamity that strikes a believer, even if it is a pricking of a thorn, as small as a pricking of a thorn, God writes for him a pious deed in his account, or one of his sins is obliterated from his account because of the patience he shows. So you can clearly see this narrative actually has some something of the sort of an underpinning for us. Of course, at times the hadiths, the ahadiths that we study, they are not of the sort in which at times all things are expressed at the same time, because as you can see that people who report ahadiths, they actually at times report ahadiths uh, without mentioning the context. They sever at times the words from their context. At times the complete picture is not there, and at times obvious things are omitted. So here, what the thing we need to understand is that there is a common misconception which again has arisen because of this hadith, not understanding it properly, and that is that if we are put through a trial and if there is something which comes our way, as this hadith apparently says, that even if you are pricked by a thorn, even a small calamity as pricking by a thorn reaches us or afflicts us, then as far as a believer is concerned, that trial will become a means of brushing away his or her sins. So one can ask this question, that why? Why is this that the hadith is telling us that if we are put to certain problems, if we are put through certain calamities, as soon as we are put through these calamities, it is a guaranteed fact that we will be rewarded. In fact, we will be rewarded in a way in which our sins will be brushed away. So we have to understand, as I said, that narratives, when they are reported like this, when they are discussed like this, at times they are not discussing the complete context here. And if we supply this context as is discussed in the Quran, the thing which the Prophet is trying to tell us is that for every calamity that strikes us, for every problem that we go through, it's a means of brushing away our sins. Why? Because when a calamity comes to a believer, when a problem comes to a believer, and he shows steadfastness in it, he or she shows patience in it, instead of complaining, instead of brooding, he or she still thanks God for his great favors on him. Then, because of this attitude of patience and this attitude of gratitude, trials brush away the sins. So, brushing away the sins is not the immediate consequence of being put through a trial. It's actually the immediate consequence of the attitude that we adopt when we are put through a trial. So it's not that as soon as we go through a trial, all our sins will be forgiven. No, it's not what the Prophet is trying to say here. What he's saying here is that trials provide us the opportunity to become people of their mettle, to show to people that it's not just the claim that they're making of faith; they're actually following a certain routine in life. They're following certain routines. So If they are put through a trial, then instead of brooding and complaining and feeling low, they actually still show steadfastness. They show patience, and as a result, this becomes a means of brushing away their sins. So there is this, not there is this, which we should not find an immediate cause and effect sort of a formula that as soon as a trial comes to us, therefore the result of that trial would be that our sins will be brushed away. It's not that. This is not the connection. The connection, as I said, is that missing part, which means that when trials comes to us, and in spite of those trials, we show steadfastness, we show patience, we thank God for the favors that He has given us, we show resoluteness. Then, as a result of this attitude, our sins are brushed away. And I think that in a very short way, we can say that that periods of trial, periods of calamity, they provide us an opportunity to come closer to God, because when we are in this state of trial and tribulation, we are, of course, in a state in which we remember God more. So actually, trials give us this opportunity of coming closer to God. And when we come closer to God, of course, this is a means of becoming more pious. It's a means of becoming more attached to God. It's a means in which hopefully our sins will be forgiven if we adopt a right attitude. So I would say that as soon as we face a trial, as soon as we think that we are being faced with a trial, because you see, trial is something and tribulations are something which are part and parcel of our lives. We just cannot run away from them. So instead of running away from them, let's make friends with them. Yes, let's make friends with them. And when I say we make friends with them, it means that we first of all accept them. We should come out from the state of denial that we often are when we face a trial. Because you see, trials, they don't come before informing you that they're coming. They come at times, they come to stay. At times, one trial after the other comes. There is an incessant series of trials and problems that we face. So our attitude should be a positive attitude. Our attitude should be that we will face these trials as a challenge. We will make these disadvantages become our own advantages. And how so? By using this state of sadness, this state of affliction as a means to come closer to God, as a means to become more stronger in faith, more attached to the Almighty. And if this is something that we take up as a challenge, I can assure you that, of course, as the Hadith says, inshallah, our sins will be washed away, our sins will be brushed away, because we have taken these trials as a challenge. We have taken these trials as something which, although seemingly impede us, seemingly stop us, but in fact, they propel us even faster. They actually, it's like saying that adverse winds, they blow so that we can fly even higher. Adverse winds, when they flow against us, we exert more. When we exert more, we put in more effort. The result is that we are able to fly higher than than what we were already doing. So I think that we need to understand that this cause and effect uh, mentioned apparent in this narrative has to be taken with this specification that trials are not meant to wash away sins unless, of course, the right attitude is shown when person comes to this in this situation or faces this situation. Let me now come on to the third part of our first segment, and this is a Bible verse that we study. We study some Bible verses every time that we have this session. And as far as today's verse is concerned, I have selected chapter 10, verse 28 from the Gospel of St. Matthew. Uh, the words are, "And have no fear of those who put to death the body, but are not able to put to death the soul. But have fear of him who has power to give soul and body to destruction, and to give soul and body to destruction in hell." So, as you can see, that the thing which is being underscored and being stressed here is that we should not have fear of those people who can only kill us, but they are not going to kill the soul that we have inside us. So a person who has control of our body and our soul is only one, and there's only one being, and that is the Almighty. So have no fear of those who put to death the body, but are not able to put to death the soul. Because if a person is able to put to death someone, he can kill that person. He can, of course, end his life, but his ideals, but his views would still survive. And the only person to take away his soul and his physical body is the Almighty Himself. So if we have to fear anyone, it has to be the Almighty. If we have to be scared of someone, is the Almighty, because the Almighty not only gives death to the body, He also claims the soul, and it goes to Him in the world of Barzakh, as we know. So what Prophet Jesus is trying to stress here is that we have to concentrate that if there is someone that we have to really fear, it's only God and God. All other things that we fear are in fact not to be feared, because whatever they can do is at best take away our physical existence. They cannot take away our soul. They cannot take away the ideas that we have. They cannot take away the legacy that we leave behind. So it's in the fitness of things that we should only fear the Almighty. We should only fear what He has to tell us, and we have to fear displeasing Him. As far as others are concerned, they can, at best, as I said, they can persecute us. They can really be cruel to us. They can claim our lives, but they cannot claim our souls. And as we can clearly see that in the case of humankind, it's your soul which is the real thing. It is the inner spirit that we have that is actually our distinction as a human being. Because as far as physical existence is concerned, animals and human beings are exactly the same. It's only when we think that we have our special relationship with God, in which our soul and spirit is also attached to Him, that we find ourselves being distinct from other living beings. So, dear viewers, with these introductory lines from the Quran, the Hadith, and the Bible, some of the verses that we have studied from all these three sources, I now come to the end of our first session or the first segment. And if you have any questions, please do let me know. And then after that, we're going to proceed to the next segment, in which, as I said, I will discuss this issue of apostasy, because it seems to go against what the verse of the Quran that we have just studied says, that like Raf Deen, there is no compulsion in religion. So that is something we're just going to discuss presently. But before that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Rafia Saiba has a question, so if you can click on her mic, we will unmute her.
Okay. Please proceed.
Slalin, Dr. Shehzad, this hadith that you quoted, how does one know that all these hadiths are authentic? Is because this hadith is very, very important and very relevant. So I just wanted to ask you, how does one know about different hadiths and the context?
Well, the science of hadith studies is a very developed science. It was developed very earlier on, and it's like like judging history and evaluating what the Prophet said when people asked him certain questions, or when people came to him with their problems. So, like a person who was living in a society in who would have his role in the society very wholeheartedly. He was a part of the society in which he was living. So when people would come to him with their problems, with their questions, these questions related both to their worldly issues and to their religious issues. So he would reply to them, and in return, as is the case, that his replies would be preserved by people, so that those who are not present would also benefit. So this is how it all started, and I think this is a very natural way in which things start, because whenever there are people as great as the prophets of God, there ought to be a lot of knowledge which is emanating not just formally in the form of the Quran, but also informally in the form of various questions and issues which people ask. So hadith is nothing but this knowledge which we find the Prophet transferring us through various narrators and through various companions, all the way down to the book, to the compilers of hadith, and then, of course, from them they reached us as well. But as far as your question is concerned, this was just a background. the question that you had asked is that how do we know that these are authentic? So the science of hadith actually has developed certain tools, and I call these tools historical tools of historical criticism. When we apply these tools, we are able to sift out whether a hadith is telling what the original purport was or not. And when we do so, we actually judge the person who narrated on the one hand, and on the other hand, we also judge the content which they narrate, and we judge the content by analyzing it in the light of the Quran, in the light of other historical and intellectual principles which are established in humankind. So we present a narrative through all these processes. It's like a sieve. It's like a sieve in which, so to speak, this water is put through, and what remains, which passes through the sieve, as pure as we can obtain it, we actually use that water. And then this sieve is not just applied by a single person. There is a series of scholars who keep coming and keep trying to put this water through that sieve, because each time they pass it through that sieve, it becomes purer than before. So it's an ongoing process, because at times it's not always easy for one person to find out if historically something had been properly narrated or not, because human errors do creep in, and not every person can always judge a particular narrative or historical data or content in a perfect way. So this continuous sieve, which should have actually remained in process since the time of the Prophet, is something which guarantees that each time the water passes through that sieve, it would be purer than before. But unfortunately, what has happened is that in the last millennium, I would say, this process has been interrupted at various instances, and we find very few areas and very few people actually applying the sieve, and they accept the words of the Prophet without actually delving into the background, and of course also without critically analyzing them. So it's like a challenge that we have to face, but we have the torch of the Quran with us. We have the torch of our common sense with us. If we use that torch and also apply these tools of historical criticism, it becomes very easier for us to find out the kernel of truth which historical data carries. And hadith is no more than history which is transferred from the Prophet. The only thing is that we call it a hadith because it's ascribed to the Prophet. Ascription to the Prophet makes that history a hadith. Otherwise, for all intents and purposes, it is history. And just as history has to be judged, it has to be evaluated in the light of various tools of historical criticism. So is the case with hadith as well.
This is very comforting, because this makes you feel that if you go through calamities, and we all go through trials day after day, then if this can, God will forgive our sins if we are patient, then there could be nothing better for us than to follow it. So thank you so much for explaining it.
So we have to understand that trials and tribulations, they are actually a means of providing us with windfall opportunities, with bonus opportunities. In normal routine of life, we have normal challenges. But the bigger the challenge, the greater the challenge, the greater the reward. So the bigger the calamity, and the bigger and the more resolute attitude that we show, it's more likely that the Almighty will guide us even further and brush away our sins. So we have to, as I said, take these challenges as, or these calamities as a challenge. And when we do so, we do hope that our God consciousness, our attachment with the Almighty will, inshallah, become better than before.
Thank you very much.
Dr. we have a question from Safwan Ahmed, but before that, if I could make a quick announcement. Whenever you ask a question, excuse me, from Dr. Shehzad, kindly, when you're getting your answer, mute your mic so there is no background noise. It's a little distraction for everyone, so I would appreciate if you do that. Dr. Safwan Ahmed.
Please go ahead. I wanted to ask if I can ask a question besides the material that you have presented. If not, then I'll just wait.
So the procedure that we follow here is that if you have to ask questions which do not relate to the content, we take them at the end. We do have about 10-15 minutes at the end in which you can ask all sorts of questions. But this particular segment in which the time is reserved especially for the three texts that we have studied, the Quran, the Hadith, and the Bible, the questions relate to these texts. So if you're not related to them, then we can actually still discuss it, but then at the end of the session.
Okay, I will wait then. Thank you.
So I don't see any more questions, and I shall now go on to the next part of our study circle, the second part. And this part actually relates to a misconception that we generally discuss. And as I said, that the misconception that I'm going to discuss today actually relates to the Quranic verse that we have studied at the very beginning of the study circle. Says that there is no compulsion in religion, like Raha fi Deen, and Kattabayyan Rushdu min al guidance is apparent or manifest or distinct from misguidance, and God has not made us compulsory or mandatory upon us to follow His religion. It's up to us whether we accept or not. We do not do so. So apparently, if this is what the message of this verse is, then the question arises that there is a hadith in Bukhari, this Al-Jami al-Sahih of Imam Bukhari, which is of course a very highly regarded hadith collection, a canonical hadith collection in Muslim annals and in archives, that how this particular hadith actually says, "Man baddala dinahu faqtuluhu," which means a person who changes his religion, kill him. And of course, the context here is that the religion means Islam. So effectively, the hadith means that a person who adopts religion, a person who accepts religion, or a person who professes faith in Islam, and then because of any other reason, he leaves the fold of Islam, apparently this hadith tells us that he has to be put to death. Now, I think that we need to understand, as I have just made this point, that our hadiths have to be interpreted in the light of the Quran. They cannot be taken individually or independently without actually referring them to the Quran, because basically these are words of the Prophet which are often reported out of context. The context is with the person who is actually discussing something with the Prophet. So the context is in his mind, but at times what he reports is just a few sentences or a few words from that context, whilst in the Quran we have the complete context. And that is why it is essential that when we study a hadith, we must gather the material of a particular narrative as far as we can, collate it, collaborate it, and then, of course, evaluate it in the light of the Quran. So if we study this hadith in the light of the Quran, then we can clearly see that this does not at all relate to the fact that a person who changes his faith at all times whenever he is dissatisfied, for example, or he would like to give away to some other reasoning or to accept some other point of view or even give up religion, then he is going to be put to death. I think I did explain this in the very last class that we had last week, that there is this divine practice of God in which He actually uh, delivers this worldly punishment and makes this worldly punishment a proof for the punishment in the hereafter. So the Quran is replete, it's replete. It discusses this so much in so many ways, in so many styles, that there is this law of the Almighty in which truth is made evident to the people of messages of God, the foremost addressees. And if they intentionally deny the truth, then they are punished for this denial, so that this can become a proof to the fact that people who had denied in this world, similarly, if they persist with this attitude, they are going to have the same result in the hereafter. So, in other words, the reward and punishment which is going to take place in the hereafter is visibly, is empirically substantiated in this world, in the times of the messengers of God. And generally, people who deny something from a messenger of God, of course, you need to understand that this denial is not of the sort of any misunderstanding. It's not because the message is not clear to him or her, or it's certainly not because there is some confusion. But the fact is that the Quran stresses, and I think I do have this in mind that even the Bible and the Old Testament does corroborate it, that when people intentionally deny something, that when people deliberately deny something which they are convinced of in their own hearts, it is only then that the Almighty gets really angry. And for them, He has prescribed this punishment, or this worldly punishment, which is discussed not only in the Quran but also in the Old Testament. And people who are polytheists, which means that they accept more than one God. Of course, when I say polytheist, we must not confuse Christianity with polytheism, because Christianity basically is a monotheistic religion. Although there could be some practices that smell of polytheism, but in no way at all can Christianity be called a polytheistic religion. So, leaving aside that, we need to understand that in the religion of the prophets of God, polytheism, people who profess to polytheism, were actually put to death for this polytheistic belief, because for them, uh, the the order was that they have to either accept God as one or face execution, because they are the ones to whom arguments were presented from the Almighty Himself regarding His own oneness, regarding His own sole existence. And instead of accepting those arguments, they were convinced otherwise. They were convinced that the God Almighty is one in their hearts, but it's still they denied the Almighty. So basically, it's denial which was behind them. And in the case of the Prophet Muhammad, or the last prophet of God, this is what happened. The polytheists or the idolaters of Arabia intentionally denied, as the Quran says, they were convinced of the fact that God is one, but still they did not accept Him as one, and they had their own interests. To these people, the Almighty says that if they, in spite of being convinced, so I should repeat this, I think, it's not out of any confusion, it's not out of any doubt, it is because that you are convinced in your heart of a certain truth. You think that it is right, but you still do not accept it. So this is not less than arrogance on our parts, that if we are convinced of something and we do not accept it. So in the case of the polytheists, this is the rule that the Quran mentions, is that their punishment will take the form of execution, because for polytheists, there is no concession, as is the case for the people of the book. For the people of the book, they are still monotheists. They may be deviants as far as monotheism are concerned, but primarily they are monotheists, and hence for them, the punishment in the time of the messengers of God has always been of a lesser form. However, in the case of those people who have accepted a certain truth and they have professed faith in something else, then for them, especially if this is of the nature of idolatry or polytheism, then they have to be dealt with in such a stern way. So we need to understand that the hadith of the Prophet, which is saying that put to death the idolaters, is actually or it says that people who change their religion kill them. It's specific in its purport. It's not an absolute thing, and it's speaking of these idolaters of Arabia. It's not meant for every person who accepts faith and then changes it. As I said, for those people who accept faith amongst the foremost addressees of God, if they are polytheists in their own following, if they're basically polytheistic in their practices, then they are put to this immense trial. So, summing up, I would say that as far as Man baddala dinahu faqtuluhu is concerned, the fact that put to death every person who changes his faith, it specifically relates to the idolaters of the times of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It does not have bearing on anyone else, because, as I said, that this law was meant for the immediate addressees of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, as was the case with previous messengers as well. And amongst his addressees, those who were primarily monotheists, they were allowed to live if they accepted the subjugation of the Islamic rule. But people who were idolatrous, people who were polytheistic, they had to go through this punishment of being executed if they still adhered to their own belief. Because, as you can see, the Quran says at a number of places that polytheism is something which they have invented. If anyone could have told them that polytheism is the real creed, it could have been the Almighty. If the Almighty has associated someone with Him, made someone His partner, so the only person who could have told us this was the Almighty Himself. So, in the absence of any such information from the Almighty, the Quran says this is iftara. It's like concocting a lie on the Prophet. So that is why it is very harsh on these idolaters. And if you can see that this particular verse of this particular hadith of the Prophet in the right context, then you'll understand that it relates to the laws of the messengers of God. It does not have any bearing. It does not have any relationship. It does not have any uh, implication as far as people today are concerned. The law that I have just described before you relates to the times of the messengers of God. It only comes into play, it only comes into practice in their times, so that this law, when it is practiced, when it is implemented, it becomes a rehearsal of what's going to take place in the hereafter. But once prophets of God have passed away, this law does not apply anymore. It does not come into play anymore. It's meant for the messengers of God. All of the people who come after the era of the messengers of God, their punishment is deferred, is delayed to the day of judgment when they shall be raised up and then put through this whole process. But before that happens, as I said, this particular hadith has to be interpreted in the light of the established principles of the Quran, as per which idolaters were put to death in the times of the prophets of God because they intentionally denied, and of course, they had no clue as to why polytheism is the creed that they would adopt, other than the fact that they had concocted it in the name of the Almighty. So this is a very brief explanation. If you have any questions, I can explain it further. We have also written material on this topic which can be presented. But let me tell you that this is something that we have to very bravely present before our our critics, and those who criticize this particular view of our religion, that it was never meant in the first place to be something which tells us that we have to put to death every person who changes our faith, his faith or her faith. It's not like that. It's governed by a specific law of the Almighty, which comes into force only in the times of His messengers of God, and it comes into force so that that law can become a rehearsal, an empirical evidence of what is going to take place actually in the hereafter. So with that, I come to the end of this second segment as well, and if you have any questions, I would be very glad to answer them.
Shehzad, you had a remaining question from Safwan, and you can see
okay,
two other questions from Saleem Saab and Rafia Saab.
So Safwan Saab, I think you can go ahead first.
Okay, thank you so much. My question is part of a little confusion. We were raised with the concept that Adam alayhi salam was made by God and put in paradise and then sent down to earth. But after listening to the explanation and then in the Quran, it says it's a part of an evolution. And most probably and likely, if I may, Adam alayhi salam probably had biological parents. And that was part of the evolution. And then he was given the ruh afterwards, after a long period of time. If that is the case, then I wanted to understand a ayah in the Quran that's causing a confusion, maybe on my part, which is Surah Al-Imran. And it's the ayah number is 59, which basically says, surely in the sight of Allah. Oh no, sorry, not this one. It's indeed the example of Isa alayhi salam is like Adam. He created him from dust. Then he said to him, be, and he was. So I guess my question is that does Adam alayhi salam have biological parents? If yes, then what is this ayah actually referring to here? Thank you.
So, if you study Surah Sajda, which is actually the place where the Quran has explained its own theory of creation or its own theory of evolution, you can clearly see that Adam and Eve might have had biological parents. In fact, it's all the more probable. I think that this is a slightly more technical discussion. We do have some write-ups on this, which I can send later on, but very briefly put, as far as the verse 59 of Surah Al-Imran is concerned, it does not negate this, because in Surah Sajda, the words are that some time must have passed on the progenitors of Adam, I would say, who were perfected, and then one of them was selected as as Adam and Eve, the couple, which of course means that Adam and Eve might be having biological parents. As far as Surah Al Imran verse is concerned, it only tells us that the similarity between Jesus and Adam is that in both cases it was the kalma kun, or the word of kun, which materialized. So if Adam was born without, it did not, if Jesus did not have a father, it does not mean that this could apply same in the case of Adam if we don't think that he doesn't have a father and a mother at the same time. So the comparison is not between actually the father or the fact that Jesus does not have, was not without a biological father, and Adam and Eve are with the biological father. The comparison is rather between the fact that when the Almighty decrees something, it is basically his word, his command of kun, which materializes, and it materialized in the form of Adam without having him go through the way that we do go through. Of course, he was perfected, or he was chosen from his biological parents. But in the case of Jesus, it was an entirely different process, and he came into being without a father, and he had a biological mother. So, as I said, the comparison is not actually between the two having parents or not having parents. The comparison is between the fact that both of them, they came into being through that kalama kun, or through that command of God, which says be and it is done. And when it says it is done, it means that it goes through a whole process which is ordained for that species. So if for Adam was that, of course, he and his wife Eve would be perfected. They were the first perfected human pair, which was given the status of a human being. Other than that, of course, they had biological parents. But in the case of Jesus, it was that he did not have a father at all. So if I just make this reiteration, that the comparison is actually not between the parents, one having biological parents and the other having just a father, but the comparison is rather between the fact that when the Almighty decides to create something of his own law, then nothing impedes him, nothing hinders him. Just as Adam and Eve, they were created through his own command, through a certain process was followed. In a very similar way, Jesus was created. So, if I've been able to make sense of what I'm trying to say, is that please don't look for the comparison between the parents in both these verses. The comparison is not between the parents. The comparison is actually between the way in which human beings develop, and if they do, they have a certain similarity, and this similarity, of course, the fact that the Almighty is calling the shots in this case. If you need something more detailed, I can send you some write-up on this subject as well, because it's slightly technical, and I have not discussed the Surah Sajda verse, which is very explicit. It's Surah 32 and verse 9 to be precise, which actually gives us this impression that Adam and Eve did have biological parents.
Thank you so much. I think the ayah itself, the way it presents, it's causing a confusion. But I think it's like you said, it's a technical discussion, and if I can read anything further on that would be great. Thank you so much.
Oh.
You have a question from Shehzad.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Shehzad, mic is still muted. If you click on that, it should at least unmute it from our end. Shehzad, if your mic is muted from your side, if you can click on it, it should unmute it.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Yes, I can. Please,
Okay.
please go ahead.
So in regards to the hadith that you mentioned, I'm just curious if you know who among, let's say, the top scholars interpret it in that way. I know this is Gandhi Sahab's view. So like among the top, let's say 4 or 5, like Ghazali, Ibn Taymiyyah, Shah Waliullah. I know Maududi Sahab interpreted completely in the Murtad Ki Saza Mein. So can you refer to, do you think it's a departure from the traditional Muslim thought? Or there are top scholars that interpret in the way that is being interpreted by you and Gandhi Sahab?
So I'd like to first comment on this approach. You see, when we study a Quranic verse, when we study a hadith, I think that the most important thing that we need to understand is the arguments a person gives in favor of that hadith or a Quranic verse. It does not matter if someone previous to us or someone who will come after us is going to concur with us or not. Because you see, concurrence is something which is not always guarantee for what the true or right opinion is. I think the right approach is that as individuals, as Muslims, as human beings, in the first place, we have we are accountable to God vis-a-vis our intellect. We are accountable to God the way we understand things. And when we understand certain things, of course, we have to understand them on the basis of certain arguments. For if certain arguments are presented and we are convincing, of course, think view and there is something which has come to us which is entirely opposite to what we have generally thought of in history, then this demands that we give more attention and we become even more concentrated between the two opinions and analyze which of the two opinions. So it's the opinion, the argument that counts. Because when a person gives an opinion, it's not just merely an opinion. He argues in favor of that opinion. He tells us how he has reached that opinion by reflecting on the book of God. So my request to you would be that instead of finding out who previous scholars, of course, it could be an academic discussion. I can tell you that I don't know of any person who did so. But as I said, should this matter? Because if
Right.
the issue is that we have to count the number of people, then that is something else. And if we have to weigh an opinion in the light of reason and revelation, then that is perhaps the real approach. So if you dismiss the view that I have just presented you, because you have a stronger view, you think that you are more convinced of the other view, you have all the right, and in fact, it's incumbent upon you to follow that view. So I think that instead of counting people, it's more important that you weigh the arguments which people present for a point of view.
Right. No, I understand that. So that the only question that's what just I wanted to ask because of my lack of knowledge. This is a departure, which is fine. I basically agree with that. I know in Murtad Ki Saza and Sayyid Maududi, basically the main argument he presents is the the punishment of a traitor, right? From a
Right.
right, yeah. So from a country or treason.
The
It's a
person who has
treason,
gone to high treason.
right? Treason, right?
Yeah.
So that's
That's how Maududi Sahib is.
right, which in the light here doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I was just curious if there was other or not. So because that's what I see
Right.
here between the Farahi school of thought and Islahi and Gandhi Sahab's, that there is a significant departure from traditional thought, which is good because of the research and basically reconstruction or reformation of the thought. That's the whole idea here. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Shehzad Sahab, you will also see, besides a hand next to a name, you may also see a question mark. And the question mark refers to a written question. And on your control panel, you have a tab for questions. If you expand on it, you'll see a written question from Tahir Ahmed Saab.
Uh, so it's, I think if could you read out the question? I don't think that I've been able to locate it.
Um,
Tahir Ahmed. I should double click on it.
no, on the right-hand side, you have a control panel. And in that, you have tabs like webcam, audio, dashboard, and you have a tab for questions.
Yes, I've opened that.
And you'll see his question there.
Yes, I've just. Okay. Uh, okay, I think that it says, keeping in mind the law of completion of proof, when I read the verses of cutting hand of thieves of Surah Al-Ma'idah, in the same ayat it is mentioned it is penalty from God. So is it not concerned? Okay. So yes, I got your question. No, this is not the case actually here. The actual verse of the Quran, Surah Al-Ma'idah says, "Jazā'an bima kasaba nakalam min Allah." It's not just min Allah; it says nakalam min Allah, which means that this is something which they have earned uh, from their wrong attitude, and nakalam min Allah. It's like an exemplary punishment from God. So it's not that when we study this verse, it should relate entirely to Al Hujjah. The law of Al Hujjah, as you can see, relates to people who intentionally deny the truth. So, as far as cutting off the hands of a thief is concerned, or for that matter, lashing someone for adultery and other offenses, all these do not relate to the law of Imam al-Hujjah. They are basically offenses which people cut, which people actually perpetrate. The confusion you might have, I think, that might have arisen is because of this minallah word. So if you could just go back and read it again, it's not just says it's not minallah, it says jazam bima kasaba nakalam minallah. So nakal in Arabic means something of a punishment of an exemplary nature. So I have answered your question. If I've got your question, do let me know. Otherwise, I can always elaborate. So, in a nutshell, these punishments, when they are mentioned in the Quran, they are mentioned as punishment for certain offenses, and they do not relate to the law of Imam al-Hujjah, because the law of Imam al-Hujjah relates to a divine punishment in which this punishment is actually meted out by the Almighty Himself through either directly through various calamities or through prophets of God. So the two are entirely different. In case I have not been able to answer this question, please you can clarify it even more. But the bottom line is that Nakalam minallah are the words of that verse. You can just go back and read them. You'll find out it has a totally different background.
You have a question from Rafi Khaja Saban.
Okay, please proceed.
If you could unmute her mic.
Okay. So it goes on and off.
There is a little lag, so if you click on it and wait 2 seconds, it should.
Me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can hear you now.
Dr. Shehzad, I wanted to ask you, when Christians call Jesus Christ the Son of God, is it possible, like in Arabic, we say Abu Khalid, father of so and so, or do they literally mean like Son of God? Because I don't understand that. And the second thing I want to mention, that you constantly we talk of the Quran saying certain things which are era specific, but the problem arises if you give the Quran to a non-Muslim, you have to keep telling him that this only applies to that era, and that, like it's Quran says, kill the mushrikeens. Now, unless you explain it, it becomes a very, very big problem to make him understand what the Quran is saying. So if you could kindly answer both these questions.
Actually, I'll answer the second one first. That you're absolutely right that it is very difficult at times, very confusing to hand over a book like the Quran to a non-believer or to a Christian or to a person of any faith. And when he sees that as a Christian or a Jew or a people of the book, he is mentioned there, and then there's a lot of harshness, because you see, you will find that there are very stern verses. Killing is, of course, the extreme example, but less than that, we have other examples as well. So, as I said earlier on, I think in some of our previous sessions, that we at Al-Mawrid have developed a short introduction to the Quran, which is going to be printed, inshallah, uh, perhaps next month or so, which is like a 20 or 25-page document, which is basically meant to introduce the Quran to and not only a non-Muslim, but to ourselves as well. Because you see, this misconception regarding the law of Imam al-Hujjah is not just prevalent amongst non-Muslims. Even Muslims, they have a different notion. So I think that before handing over the Quran, or simultaneously handing over the Quran, if we could hand over that small booklet to them, which it's like a prelude to the Quran. It's like a foreword written in the Quran, which is meant to tell them that how they should view the Quran, especially when it expresses some harsh sentiments regarding the people of the book. So I would agree with you that just presenting merely the Quran might be problematic and might cause more confusion. So if you're able to lay hands on that introduction from Al-Mawrid's website, inshallah, maybe next month or so, this might solve the problem. And your first question was?
My first question was that when we talk of Christians say Jesus, the Son of God, could it just mean like we all are children of God? Like, when we talk in Arabic, they say Abu Khalid, father of so and so. So,
Well, actually,
that was confusing me.
This question would be a Christian scholar himself, because this in itself is something of a very baffling nature. And as far as I have studied, it's not just as simple as you've just stated. Actually, it's very complex, and the whole concept of Trinity, it cannot be grasped very easily, because it has a number of overtones attached to it. But just to sum up, or just to cut the long story short, it's not that they speak of Jesus as the Son of God in a figurative way. It's not a figurative. It's not that easy. They think that Jesus itself is actually a Son of God, and it's like the human side of God which manifested itself before people. So the human side of God is the best uh, explanation that I can give. Although I see there are certain problems even in this explanation. But when you argue with Christian scholars, to me it's very clear that they're not just speaking figuratively as if as if we are a family of God. No, they literally mean that He is God incarnate. He is actually God, and He is actually the human form of God. And this is something which is something which needs to be delved into rather more deeply.
Yeah, I understand. So they say he'll get all their sins forgiven, and it's just totally puzzling. Thank you so much.
Shehzad, the class time is over. There's 2 more written questions. You can do one or two things. Either you can take those if you so choose, or I think most people are on your broadcast list and they can send you anything left over directly.
So it's entirely up to you. If you think that we can go on, I can answer the questions here.
I mean, if you like, you can take the last 2 questions. And again, in the tab where it says questions, if you expand on it, you'll see 2 written questions. One from Mateen Tahir and one from Munazzam Malik.
Keeping in mind the law, it says, what should be the role of Muslims to make the counter narrative effective? How much is it the responsibility of the parents to teach their kids about religion, and how much is it their own responsibility to learn on their own when they are young, etc.? So, okay, this is a fairly important question, and I think, although it needs a detailed answer, but very briefly put, I think the biggest service which parents can make in the intellectual development of their children is to instill in them the quest for the truth. And this is the biggest gift that you can give to your children. Tell them that they should be true seekers of what the truth is. And wherever they find it, from whomsoever they find it, they should cling on to it for life. So I think the biggest thing that as parents, we can teach is make them people, to make them individuals for whom the biggest enterprise, the biggest venture in their lives is to find out what the truth is. And I say what the truth is, it means, of course, religious truths as well. And the best way to find or to start this journey is to critically evaluate questions that come to your own mind, or questions which are posed by other people to us. So it's not like reinventing the wheel or starting criticizing or this journey, or embarking upon this journey once again. The way to do so, the way to seek the truth is that whenever there is a question that arises on a particular issue, either in our own minds or if it is posed to us by someone else as an objection or as a reservation or anything, then we should give it a serious thought. We should critically analyze things the way we are trying to do in this session, and then form an opinion. So that is what I think is the biggest responsibility of our parents. And of course, as you rightly said, that it has to begin by themselves. They have to adopt this attitude of being people who are always trying to find out what the truth is, even if the truth is against their own interests, even if the truth is something which goes against their own vested interests, or it displeases their parents, or it displeases their relatives. So we as human beings, the biggest task that we are given is that we have to find out the truth, even at the cost of our own lives at times, even at the cost of displeasing our closest of relations. So if we can instill this spark in them, I can assure you that it will have its own effects, and it's all that we need to do. And the rest will be done by the spark itself. It will ignite that person from within, and it will drive him to find out what the truth is. So I think this is the best thing that we can perhaps give as a gift to our children. And this should start at a very early age. The earlier, the better. I think we have another question.
Yeah, this is the second one that's left.
There is one more question.
Yes, from Mateen Tahir Sahib, in the questions tab, you'll see it.
Mateen Tahir.
You'll see it in the questions pane.
Right, I see it now. Mateen Tahir. I see the name. Oh, says I cannot hear.
No, he has a written question. He's asking, what should be the role of Muslims to make counter-narrative effective?
Okay, right. Okay,
I think, as I said, that the biggest role of Muslims as far as this, following their religion is concerned is to first of all find out the truth for themselves. And the basic truths, of course, are always moral in nature. We have to be morally good human beings. As far as the counter narrative on religion is concerned, this is the intellectual endeavor that every Muslim does when he indulges in critical thinking. So, critical thinking, as I think I have discussed this elsewhere in our previous sessions, is the right way in life. If we instill this quest for truth, which I was just talking about, of course, side by side with this quest for truth comes this approach, what we call as critical thinking. And when we instill this approach of critical thinking, it will automatically be have an impetus on finding out the counter arguments on what we generally believe now. So the counter argument or the counter narrative is not just relating to state or to this jihadi worldview. That's just a small part. A bigger counter narrative is that if we try to critically view and analyze various concepts that are presented to us by our parents or by the society around us, we'll find that either they are misconceptions or they are cultural perceptions, or they are misnomers, I would say. So there is a counter narrative to everything. And that counter narrative basically comes through that critical thinking. So if we initiate this process of critical thinking, as we did that process of quest for the truth, it will automatically induce ourselves and our children that whenever we come across a point of view which is different from the generally accepted point of view, we must give it proper attention. And as I said, this is not merely confined to the jihadi counter narrative, which is of course generally spoken of. It's like having a counter narrative to every narrative that we think or come across in our lives. It could relate from, for example, as I said, there is this very common notion that we have to pray the sunnah and the farz rakats, and both of them are of equal importance. This is the narrative that we come across. But the counter narrative that you might come across is that just the obligatory or the farz rakats are obligatory. So it's not just the jihadi point of view which has a counter narrative. I think critical analysis will show that every point of view that we have hitherto been exposed in our lives has a counter narrative as well. And that is best understood through this process of critical thinking, and of course through the process of quest for the truth, which, as I said, we should initiate in our young ones.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. All the questions are done, so you can close the session if you like from file, end webinar,
Okay.
exit.
Okay then, Khuda Hafiz, and thank you very much.